Hello and welcome to Fidelity Next. I'm your host, Emily Anenuevo. Whether you're a student, recent graduate, or looking to make moves in your career, the fall is a great time to position yourself for a new opportunity. On top of the experienced roles currently available at Fidelity, we're in the middle of our campus recruitment period, on the lookout for co-op students and interns for our winter term of 2025. Today we're here with staffing specialist Magda Kajo, who's going to give us some insights and tips on how to go through the recruitment process with ease and confidence. Welcome, Magda.
Thank you for having me, Emily. It's great to be here again.
Great to have you here. Now, let's get straight into it. Before we dig into the topics at hand, let the audience know, as a staffing specialist, what does your role entail?
Yeah, so what I love about being a staffing specialist is being able to have so much exposure to so many different lines of business within Fidelity. So really our job as staffing specialists, or recruiters as more commonly known, is really to partner with hiring managers and really find that top talent for their roles. So it's really great because anytime that there's a new role in a new area, I find that I too learn a lot about that side of the business, along with helping find that right candidate for the role. So it's very, very exciting from that perspective. And then from others, I really love working with my team. We go to events from time to time as well. So whether it's career fairs or even with our campus team, we go to events on campuses, colleges, universities. For me, it's mostly been in the GTA area, but that's also great as well. And then also, since I'm a former co-op, I get to also go to some events to really be sort of a former co-op mentor to some of our co-ops every term. So that's always a nice full circle moment for me.
Fantastic overview of your role, Magda. Now, I'm always excited to cover the recruitment process and the student recruitment process in these episodes. It's so popular with the students, looking to apply for the winter term. So can you just delve into some of the common roles we hire for at Fidelity and some of the placements in the co-op term?
Yeah, so the thing about Fidelity is we have so many roles across the organization. So yes, we are, of course, a company based in financial services, but it's not just roles in finance. So for students, full-time employees, we have roles across the organization from marketing, product, sales, tech, everything in between. So it's really a great opportunity for people to look into, to see if there's anything that fits with them, and at all career levels as well. For most of our students, or new grads rather, they're preferred, or really the common pathways there would be either in our client services division, so that's where a lot of the entry-level roles are, and a lot of students actually, and new grads, prefer to really get into those kinds of roles because they really get to build up their knowledge and foundation of financial services from the ground up in those kinds of roles, and really be able to find their own paths that way. And then there's also our sales pathway program. Again, a lot of new grads, but again, you really build that knowledge of sales in financial services from the ground up. So it's always great for the students and new grads to come back to that.
Wonderful. Now, like I said off the top, we are in the middle of our winter term, co-op term, looking for applications, accepting those applications in. Magda, give us a sense of what the recruitment process is like. How many rounds do the students go through, and what's that whole system like?
Yes, so I myself focus a lot more on the full-time hiring, but I do know, going through it as a student and also through hearing my colleagues talk about it, in terms of the student process here at Fidelity for recruitment, you would apply online, so applications are going to be going up very, very soon for January, so that's something to definitely keep an eye on. Postings are only up for 2 weeks, so it's a very tight timeline for students to get in there and really, get their applications in. If you're applying to different roles, a good tip is to also customize each application to the role that you're applying to, but really it's those 2 weeks where the postings will be up. Once the postings are down, the campus recruiters will go through the applications and they'll create a short list, so to speak, of the top candidates for that kind of role, and then they'll work with the hiring manager and the hiring team with starting interviews. For students, it's just one round, so it's what we call a panel interview. So it'll be the campus recruiter, the hiring manager, and maybe an adjacent manager of that team or of that department that will help with the interview process. And again, it's really just giving you an overall sense as an applicant of the department, of that role. And then once those interviews wrap up, then the recruiters will reach out again and they'll either give feedback or they'll help you move on to next steps when it comes to the offer.
Okay, fantastic. So like you mentioned, the application process is actually a tight 2-week window.
Yes.
And there's only one round for students. And you mentioned in your previous answer that some common roles for students, client services, sales pathway. Should co-op students, like you mentioned you were once a co-op student here, should co-op students come in with maybe 2 or 3 choices, a list of what they would be interested in? Because I've heard from other co-op students, they went in to do maybe product role, and then as the recruitment process went on, the recruiter kind of saw a better fit for them in another department. So is it helpful to have a few choices?
Yes, and that's something that we definitely encourage as well, because while you would come into a co-op here at Fidelity, it is nice to have 2 or 3 options aside from the co-op that you are currently in to also explore throughout your term. So that's something that we always encourage when it comes to networking as well. Thinking about different business areas, I think especially the benefit of being a student and being more junior in your career is being able to explore different areas. So when you have 2 to 3 options, it's nice to then be able to also fall into other areas, explore other areas, because you never know. You might end up thinking that you want to do one thing, and then you learn about another area and realize it might be better suited for you. So that's something that we always encourage. And even for co-ops who might want to come back for other terms to do with us, which is quite frequent.
Really common.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for them, it's nice because that way, you get to have like your first choice, second choice, third choice of what you want to explore, and it still ends up being a great experience at the end of the day.
That's fantastic. Now let's get into the interview process, the interview portion. I'm going to give you sort of like a fire round of 5 basic interview questions. Students and, people looking for full-time work may go through during the Fidelity interview process, right? Because sometimes you can kind of trip on those basic questions.
Yes.
So let's go through them, Magda.
Sure.
The first one, very common. Tell me about yourself.
Okay.
Tell me who you are. Tell me about yourself. How would you approach that?
So sometimes people can trip up on this because they start getting into some more personal details, but at the end of the day, it's still an interview, so you still want to keep it to your professional image, your professional qualifications, your experiences. The thing that we do different at Fidelity is this question, we kind of tie into the one that you also commonly hear is why you're interested in this role. Yes. So we don't ask blanket questions like, tell me about yourself here. We mostly ask the candidates, first thing in the interview is to walk us through their resume, walk us through their experience, highlight any areas or any skills that they have that they think would be relevant for the role that they're interviewing for. And then with that, they also end up telling us a bit more about why they're interested in the role, long-term, where they kind of see their careers going, say in the next 3 to 5 years. So thinking about some of those points, it's really nice to be able to have a whole answer for the interviewers, and it's a nice introduction. Another thing as well that you can also base it on is usually on a resume, kind of that top profile section where you talk about you're a driven undergraduate student with, let's say, 2 years of experience. You can also use that summary to help you at least build a foundation for that answer, and hopefully you can prep that a bit going into the interview. So it's an answer that really hits all the main points, but one that's concise as well.
See, I love that. It's so super helpful. So be prepared to walk through your resume, not necessarily answer a blanket question like, tell me about yourself, and keep it professional.
Yes.
Like personal stories.
You
keep
can
it
talk
to the
about
role.
you could talk about a hobby if you want to.
Sure, yeah.
I would say like something if they ask you. Sometimes the managers might ask, "What's something on your resume that what's something that's not on your resume that you can tell us about?"
Question. Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, let's say you grew up playing piano, so that's like a nice thing to add there. Or maybe you're very athletic, or you like to go on runs, like to clear your head. A lot of people with the pandemic obviously got more into physical
Health and
exercise.
wellness. Yeah.
So it's something you can tie in there, which is still a professional hobby, and then that way it also helps kind of humanize the experience as well.
Yeah, it makes sense. It sort of paints a picture that you enjoy certain interests and hobbies outside of work, obviously, right? Okay, here's another question, Magda. I don't know if this is sort of a blanket question, but what are your strengths and weaknesses? People trip on this question too, because it's like, do I really add in anything negative? I don't want to sound negative during my interview. How can an individual approach that question?
Yeah, so when the strengths, what I've heard is some people are like, oh, I don't want to brag, but it's like you're in an interview, you're here to really showcase yourself, demonstrate your skills, your experience. So it is okay to definitely highlight your accomplishments in an interview. That's definitely the place to do it. So when it comes to your strengths and weaknesses, I would say focus on feedback that you've received in the past, whether it's from a previous manager, a previous mentor or current mentor, or even like a teacher or professor.
Yeah.
Feedback that you've received from different experiences that hopefully are more aligned to the role that you're applying to. But for example, let's say you have experience working in retail. So that was something that I did as a teenager. I worked in retail. So thinking about feedback, one of the strengths that I heard was that I had strong communication skills. So if you are like that as well, or you've had a job where you've worked with people before, really in any industry, you can always talk about communication skills being something that is your strength, because either you've been trained on how to deal with customers, both with positive experiences and negative experiences. And same thing with a weakness as well. Let's say you've worked in a fast-paced environment like a busy store. So a weakness you can talk about is maybe how you had a situation where you had to learn to ask for help. So you had a customer that you maybe spent a little too long with, and another customer might have gotten upset and could have complained to a manager. So that could have taught you that, you know what, instead of just letting that customer sit there and be upset, you could have maybe tapped a colleague on the shoulder and asked them to step in and help that customer out while you were kind of finishing things up with your client. So that kind of answer shows that you're resourceful, shows that you've learned from your mistake, shows that you're someone who's learned to multitask. So you are highlighting a past weakness, but I would say it in a way that you frame it more as an area of improvement instead of a weakness. A weakness, sometimes even the word itself, it really can kind of bring you down. You want to more focus on ways to improve. Everybody has things to improve on, no matter where you are in your career. So if you kind of frame it more in that sense, it might be much easier to actually answer the question.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's a great tip. So reframe it where it's not a weakness, it's an area of improvement. And what I'm hearing is, come prepared with specific examples and feedback, like you said, from past mentors, teachers, that you're not sort of like pulling it from thin air. It's actual specific feedback that you've heard from your colleagues. Okay, that's great. Okay, a few more questions here on interview questions and how individuals can approach them. How do you prioritize tasks and manage time effectively?
Yes. So hopefully you've had an experience where you've had to prioritize, even through school. You often have a lot of projects on the go, or you have exams. So that's something where you learn to prioritize on your own, whether you might not have actually realized that. But in a more specific job situation, you're going to be getting a set of tasks, so how do you prioritize against them? I would say if you can't think of any concrete examples when you've done this, really try to walk through the team of how you would handle that situation. And it really goes for any question that you're not sure about. So for this one, you would say, you'd work with your team in terms of developing that task list based on priority, based on deadlines, and then kind of go through it that way. See maybe what projects you could leave a bit on the back burner versus others that you could handle immediately versus others that you need to do more research with and maybe collaborate more with a colleague. And that way it shows that you're someone who's organized, shows that you're someone who also has initiative, who likes to really have that sense of, this is what I'm doing, this is what you're doing, and everyone is tackling the work and really able to deliver results at the end of the day.
Okay, I hope our viewers are taking notes because this is like A+ stuff. Great insights. Okay, last question, Magda. Do you like working independently or as part of a team? So this can kind of be tricky because you can just, it's a yes or no answer. How can you expand? How can you approach it with more fuller answer?
Yeah, I would say that ideally you should show that you're able to do both. So you're able to be a strong individual contributor, as we would call it, but then you're also a strong team player. You want to be both because ultimately every work environment, you have to be adaptable because depending on the situation, depending on the project you're working on, anything that kind of comes your way, you're going to have to adapt. So what you can say is both have their advantages. This is a situation where I would work in independently versus this is a situation that I would prefer to work in a team. And you can again pull examples from even school, like working on a school project. Maybe you received a stellar mark in and it was a great learning experience versus working on something a bit more independently. I know some students do independent coursework, for example, or like a thesis. That was something that I did when I was in university. So that could be an example where you worked really well independently, but ultimately you want to show that you're able to really do both.
Okay. Answer for both. Okay, fantastic. I love those fire round questions. Now, Magda, you mentioned that you were a former co-op student here at Fidelity, 2 terms.
Yes.
What sort of advice can you lend to our viewers, to maybe new students who are thinking to apply, on how to best approach the co-op experience and take full advantage?
Yeah, so I did 2 co-op terms, which were great, both in Fidelity Investments Canada and Fidelity Clearing Canada. More so on the product research side, risk management side, but it was really, really great. It's a bit different to what I'm doing now, but I think those experiences have ultimately lent themselves to my overall knowledge and my ability to do this role as well. The reason I mention that is because it shows that with students, it's really great to keep an open mind. Especially when you're starting off your career, you might think that you might want to end up somewhere, but then you're introduced to another area that really interests you, and that ultimately might be the better path for you. So when students do come in, I do love connecting with them just because it very much reminds me of when I was a student. It's a full circle moment. So really. It's very, very nice for me as well. But yes, with the co-ops, I do some work. So every term I do actually lead the workshops on resume tips, interview skills. Fantastic. So that's always nice to have. But then also, I'm like one of a co-op mentor, so I have a mentee every term, which is nice too. And they're all different. Some have very clear ideas of where they want to go. Others are a bit more open to explore. But ultimately, I tell all of them to just make the most out of the 4 months that they're here. Yeah. It flies by. And that comes with also seeking out opportunities to, first of all, connect with their immediate team and really soak everything there because, again, it's only 4 months. Again, it might be something that you enjoy doing, might be something that maybe you're not sure about, but really give it a chance, even if it's something that you're not 100% sure about that you're going to do in the long term. But hopefully you do enjoy it. And then from your immediate team, also take advantage with the student program to think about those other areas like we were talking about a little earlier in terms of different areas of the business that you might see yourself working in as well, aside from the one that you're currently in your co-op doing. That's where you can take advantage of coffee chats, networking opportunities to really go into those coffee chats with a few questions of what you'd like to ask that other manager or that other team member. And then ultimately just being able to really understand and bring all of that training together at Fidelity too. Aside from the specific job training, the students also receive extensive training in other areas that you might not necessarily think about, like presentation skills or communication skills, emotional intelligence. Really interesting areas as well that we hope will help them ultimately be multifaceted.
Yeah, that's a lot to pack in 4 months, but really I see the co-op students just hit the ground running. Like you said, network, make your goals, your career goals known to your immediate team, because then that might spark something in their mind. Hey, Magda might like this role or this department after her term's over. I think she would be a perfect fit. So really, that's really, really great. Now, you mentioned you share a lot of resume tips with students and with incoming employees. So how can someone get their resume in tip-top shape before applying at Fidelity?
Yes, I would say that when it comes to resumes, it's good to keep things simple, especially in the beginning of your career, but really in any career, at any stage of your career. Keeping it to a page is good. Now you can play around with margins, you can play around with font size, although I wouldn't go below like size 10 font. But resumes these days, they're not printed anymore. We're not going through like a physical stack. We can see them online, so we can definitely zoom in, zoom out. But keeping it clean, keeping it concise. Typically with the resume, you want to start off with that leadership profile aspect. So objective is what you might have seen maybe in older versions of resumes where people would say, my objective is to get this job basically, and put the title there. But nowadays we use that leadership profile. So you give the team a nice summary, maybe 2 to 3 bullet points of who you are, what your interests are. There you can put a motivated graduate student or motivated undergraduate student in 3rd year studying business, looking to explore opportunities in finance, human resources, and sales, for example. And that way the team's like, okay, we get a bit of a sense of who this person is, and then you can get a bit deeper into, of course, your education. So if there are any particular courses that you took, maybe during your actual university career, if you're still in university or college, specific courses that would tie in well to the role that you're applying to, any awards that you've received. If you are a bit, if you don't have as much experience in terms of your professional work experience, you can always rely on any extracurriculars that you've done. So whether that's with school clubs or even sports, definitely being athletic, but more so working in that team environment, definitely having that discipline. Those are skills that you can always apply to an actual job. And then for extracurriculars, again, working in that team environment, leading different initiatives shows that you're someone who, again, will be able to have those leadership skills in a full-time role, but even in a co-op. So once you kind of get through that section, you get into the work experience section, you can talk about past co-ops that you've had. Usually you want to have 2 to 3 bullet points about each role. try to quantify results as much as you can. If you were in a role that had more of that quant aspect to it, where there were more numbers involved, you could say you improved efficiency by XYZ. You could talk about other teams that you were liaising with in that kind of role, main projects that you were working on if you're working on a bigger project. And again, give a nice little snapshot of what you were doing. And then at the end of your resume, you can talk about additional affiliations, interests. So if there were other things that maybe you couldn't get into in terms of your work experience, typically your work experience, you want to keep it to the last 5 years. So you want to keep things fresh. Yes. So some people might talk about high school experiences, but if high school was
X number of years ago,
it might be a bit tough. But if it was something that was really important to you, like if you won an award that was really important, or if you speak multiple languages, or if there are other charities that you work on or that you volunteer with outside of your regular school hours, your regular work hours, it's nice to include that as well, to give them, again, more of a snapshot of who you are at this current moment in time.
Oh, that's wonderful, wonderful stuff. So keep your resume to one page if you can. Scratch out that objective part. That's no longer, updated anymore. Put in the leadership profile. And don't discount any of the extracurricular and your hobbies and interests if you're a little bit light on the work experience. That's what I gathered. Yes. That's amazing. So lastly, Magda, what other tips or recommendations can you give to individuals who are preparing for a full-time role here, who wants to apply for a full-time role, or even a student applying for the co-op term?
Yes, I would say that when it comes to preparing for interviews, that's something that's really key. Of course, when you're getting your application together, we've mentioned in past videos too, we're really checking out the job posting, making sure that you meet all the requirements when it comes to education, professional experience needed, and then tailoring your resume to that in order for it to be a nice match. But then when it comes to preparing for the actual interview, I would say even going online, searching what are the common questions that you get in an interview, similar to what we did. Yeah. And that way you can start putting yourself in that mind frame of, okay, what are some examples where I could answer this, or what are some examples that I could answer that, so that way you're not kind of left out in the cold if you come across a question that you're not too sure about in the interview, which you could always say too, but it's nicer to have already started thinking about experiences you could pull from all of your experiences, work, school, charity work, things like that. Yeah. And then from there, when it comes to answering questions in the interview, aside from the technical questions you'll likely get that will be related to the role, every interview will have what's known as behavioral questions. Right. So that will sound like, tell me about a time when you came up with a creative solution, or tell me about a time when you had to handle a challenging situation with a customer or a colleague, things like that. Yeah. So when you're thinking about those kind of behavioral questions, you want to use what's known as the STAR method. So STAR stands for situation, task, action, and results. So you want to start by explaining what the situation was. You want to start by, and then after that, you want to follow up with the task that you were assigned to do, or the task that you did, the action that you followed up with after that task. So did you end up maybe making a small change to the initial task that was given to you? And then ultimately the results. What was the result of that? Hopefully the results were positive and you were able to turn things around if it was more of a challenging situation. But really also talking about the results is something that people sometimes forget about. They'll tell you about a situation, but then you're like, okay, so what did you learn from it? How did it end up going? You don't want to necessarily leave the interviewers wondering. You really want to take us through it step by step, because we weren't there with you. Yeah. So sometimes people, because they've lived through it themselves, they know all the details, but thinking about it through all of those points will help you get through all of them and really give the interviewers a nice overview of that situation, and ultimately how you grew from it, or how you added value to your team, to your organization. So the STAR method is definitely one that I always recommend to students and even full-time professionals.
Yeah, for sure. So remember, with tackling those behavioral questions in the interview, try to stick to the STAR method and close it off with a result and how you finished off that task.
Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful stuff, Magda. Thank you so much for being here. Always great to have you here, sharing your insights with our students and our potential employees here at Fidelity. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Emily.
Thanks to everyone who tuned in for today's episode. We hope you're feeling inspired to seek out new opportunities. And just a reminder, we're currently taking applications for our winter student term until September 19th. This is your chance to join other students